My name is Dan Chang. I'm the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Splash Financial. We're a fintech that works with the banks and credit unions. And I'm joined today by my expert panel of industry experts, starting with Brian Enerking, the Chief Operating Officer at First Electronic Bank here in Utah. Next to Brian, we've got Lori Payne, the Vice President of Strategic Partnership Oversight at WebBank, also here in Utah. And finally, the good-looking gentleman at the end, my former colleague, Lauren Anderson. He's the head of customer operations at Avant. Welcome, panel.
Thanks.
We get to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart today, complaints and complaint management, which I'm sure is going to be everybody's favorite panel from this conference. Like most people, I deal with complaints every day, professionally, as well as at home. I get a lot of complaints at home. I'm the complainer, but more oftentimes I'm the complainee. Does that make sense? Like a lot of us, I have two little ones at home, a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they are constantly complaining. They complain about making their bed. They complain about going to bed. They complain about getting up the next day for school. They haven't quite understood that cause and effect relationship yet, but we're working on it. My 7-year-old doesn't like to play the violin. He says that if we make him play past second grade, it might kill him. I think that's a chance that we're willing to take. But all kidding aside, despite all the noise that we get, my wife and I, from our two boys, there are times where there's a real problem. And we still have to listen. We still have to sift through the noise. For instance, last week, my 10-year-old's playing goalie for his soccer team, makes a block on a save at point blank range, breaks his hand. Yeah. He's okay, by the way. All the girls are signing his cast, so he's pretty excited about that. At the time, however, being the great dad that I am, I told him to shake it off, and that in soccer, you play with your feet and not your hands. Needless to say, in hindsight, I probably should have handled that a little bit differently. And like financial services, it's really important to listen to what the complaints are saying. The complaints are the voice of the customer. They're going to help you identify if there's an issue, if there's something that you need to take care of to make sure that you're protecting the consumer and that you're doing right by them under the law. And that's why financial services companies today are under more pressure than ever to get complaints right. For those of us that have gone through examinations with financial services regulators firsthand, we know that one of the first things that examiners will look at are your complaint logs. And as I'm sure most of us have heard, when we're in that room with these examiners, they like to remind you that enforcement actions oftentimes can be triggered by a single complaint. So turning over to the panel, I'd love to know how each of you are seeing this challenge play out in your organizations and why complaint monitoring is so important. Brian, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. It's great to see so many people interested in this topic. Actually, I've always been fascinated by complaint management because it's an inherently messy world. You know, it's like complaints are free-form text from people that are upset about a thing or upset about three things or letters or indirect or direct. It's tremendously messy data, but really important data. And it does tell us a lot about what's going on. It's kind of the canary in the coal mine for the business. It lets you know what's going to break, when it breaks, if it's something that's like a regulatory violation, and hopefully a little bit of insight into what caused it. It can tell you about operational problems. It can tell you about a portfolio that didn't, like an acquisition that didn't go well, or a new call center that got launched and there was a problem with it. So it's really interesting data. And I think just your comment about regulatory expectations, like we've really seen the expectations of oversight, knowing everything that's going on in all parts of the business swell over the years. And this is just great data for us to know what's going on. It's not the only area. I'd say it's pretty broad based. It's our expectations are we just need to know how the whole business works. We need to find problems really, really fast, and we need to make sure we can address them. And complaints is like it's kind of like the smoke. It's not going to always tell you exactly what the problem is, but it'll indicate what's going on, and it'll lead you to a conversation to figure out what that source is and if it's really a problem. So we're paying a lot of attention to it, and AI is helping us understand it more deeply, I'd say, than we have in the past.
That's great. Thanks, Brian. Lori?
Yeah, so I'll just add on to that, the regulators also expect us to know complaints that are coming into our own bank, but also to all of our third parties. You've got, any partners that you're dealing with, any of their servicers, anything that they're doing is equally important. And in the eyes of the regulators, it's all the responsibility of the bank, and definitely something that we try to get through on a regular basis is, just having a bunch of different partners, getting those complaints in and having that data, and again, being able to sift through it and find where those problems are, so that we can, do the oversight that we need to do to make sure that we're handling the regulators' expectations correctly.
Great. Lauren?
Yeah. So being a little closer to like the front lines operationally, the challenge is, you have a lot of volume, right? And to Brian's point, typically these are written by humans, right? These complaints are coming in through an agent, written intake, like evaluated by an agent as a complaint or not, written by an agent, then evaluated by somebody else on the back end as far as like resolution and response. And there can be hundreds, thousands of those every month, depending on your portfolios. And how do you determine where the real issues are in that kind of like sea of data? So, right now, or historically, I should say, primarily, and we're transitioning with the help of like new tools that we're talking about. The analysis for all that, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is very manual, right? It's like taking all that data, categorizing, subcategorizing, normalizing, standardizing, root cause analysis, like reading individual complaints, pulling up individual accounts, writing timelines, to get to the root cause. Now, obviously, that takes a ton of time. It takes a lot of you have to have a lot of legacy knowledge even to like kind of get down that pathway. So having, which we'll talk a lot more about, tools like this to help you get at least that intelligent head start place to focus is tremendously helpful. So that's the current challenge that we're hopefully, we're tackling with these kind of tools.
Thanks for that, Lauren. I think it's a good segue into the next question. Obviously, we're here at a AI and technology conference, as far as I can tell. But any thoughts on why this investment in this area has lagged behind others in terms of innovation and application of technology? In other words, why can't the legal and compliance department get the shiny new toys? Brian?
That's pretty easy, actually. It's like if you're going to originate a loan, you can make a lot of money if you apply data science to that process. And that's where companies have focused. They've focused a huge amount of investment in how to market and originate loans effectively because you're going to make a decision and you're going to see the outcomes. And that's a great laboratory, and it's discrete financial metrics, and you know exactly what your return is. Complaints is way, way harder. Just like, what is the return from doing the analysis? And sometimes it's very clear. You find a discrete problem, and sometimes you find just consumer dissatisfaction. And you've all been on an airplane, right? You've all probably complained about legroom. They know consumers aren't excited about legroom, but they still put the seats the way they put them because they make the money they make. So sometimes the data that comes out of complaint analysis doesn't actually get the business to change. In fact, that's the biggest problem I've had in the past is taking the learnings from analysis of complaints and trying to get the business to do something different with it is a really difficult thing to do. And I think that's also one of the reasons there just hasn't been enough exploration and technology. And I don't know if there's a great application. Like data science is great when you're making a decision and seeing an outcome. complaints happen after the fact. So just you applying data science itself, I think is a harder thing to do, but AI allows you to interrogate all the free-form text that's going on. And that's a better application of technology, I think. So it just fits a little bit better.
Lori, do you have a perspective you want to share?
Yeah, so mine's a little bit different in that, we talked about how manual this process is, and you've got a lot of data to sift through, and you're reading complaints. So it's kind of easy to make a process that's simple, and it's actually kind of easy to iterate on that. And so while we've got these manual processes and we've got these different, different sampling methodologies and things like that, our process wasn't broken. And so to get funding on something that's not quite broken, that part was the difficult piece. And so I think getting past it's not broken, but it can be better. I think that is one of the things that we're struggling with.
Lauren, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Brian. The ROI is tough, right? Like new loans, top of the funnel technology is an easier sell by a long shot, right? So, and to Lori's point, like we have operational systems, processes, right, that you continually iterate on. You like everybody's got their own support ticketing systems. They've got their own, you leverage Jira that's used for 7 other pieces of the business to manage complaints. You have good old spreadsheets and Google Sheets and everything else that like sort of gets you by, right? But I think, that's really why, right? It's hard to get that investment dollar into this type of platform. But like, I think, this will, proof of concept wise, I think can show how we can like more quickly and in much closer to real time, like find those issues and like maybe make a better case for these kind of tools.
And get that ROI.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's got to be an easier way. I've been there on the front lines. Reading is hard. Moving on, Brian, I want to direct this next question to you. We know that banking agencies like the FDIC, like the CFPB, your state banking agencies, they've all emphasized the importance of handling complaints quickly and efficiently. With artificial intelligence, how are you able to use these new technologies to ensure that you're staying ahead of the curve and in alignment with those regulatory expectations?
Yeah, I think when I think about like analysis of data like complaints, like you want to look at it in several ways. One's the fidelity of the information. Is do you have a good handle on the information? Do you understand what it means? Is it super clear? And then the pacing of it as well. Like how quickly can you assess what's going on? So like that's difficult for complaints. Like you meant, Lauren touched on it. Complaints are amalgamated from lots of different places, lots of different sources, from regulatory agencies, from phone conversations, from call mining tools, from all sorts of places. And they come and live in a platform typically, and they get categorized, sometimes incorrectly. And then those get in our role as the sponsor bank for many of our programs, those are transitioned to us. And those come in oftentimes like a monthly process. A lot of our challenge has been like, how do we get our arms around our data to make sure that our data is better organized and comes to us faster? So when you have these systems where you're getting data on a monthly basis, it's cool because you can categorize it and look at month over month trends, super helpful. But waiting a month before you see there's a problem isn't the best. So getting that data to be as clean as possible, consistent, is a lot of work on both sides. So the operation engine, like how it's organizing data, is it done in a way that it facilitates the transmission of that on a daily basis? We'd love to get our data sources to actually get transitioned more on a daily basis, because today, you get a monthly file, we have to spend time going through the file, reading everything, making sure it's categorized correctly, talking to our partners about, hey, this got categorized this way, why is that? Deciphering if there are really 3 things it complains about instead of 1 category it complains about. And like, if you can get that system better and get the data coming in on a daily basis and use AI to start looking for emerging themes that come out rapidly, hey, there are 10 things that were said today. If you can get to a point where you can see it today, that's really interesting information instead of seeing it a month from today and just looking at generalized categories. So it lets you categorize better, hopefully like get better fidelity in the data, and it shows you what sort of sentiments coming out, what sort of new concepts, what sort of new language is being used. Again, it's that smoke. It gives you more smoke. It doesn't alleviate. I think there was a bit of a sub question about, like, you were going to ask about the cost side of it. Like, is this like a potential cost saving? I don't know if it is. Like, I think you still have the analysis of that data. Maybe you need more analysts than you needed before, but like deciphering it and continuing to talk with all your partners about what does it mean, where does it come from, that's still going to be there. What it does get away from is having to painstakingly have a human read every single thing and do better summarization of that data. So fidelity and speed are what I see as like the two benefits we get from it.
So do you view it then as a potential force multiplier for your
Yeah,
organization
I think
and for your
so.
staff?
It's a process, though. It's going to take a lot of time just to get everyone used to the tool, how to use it, and then changing data. Like, that's not simple. That's super complicated, and it takes a lot of work for both, like, all parties to figure out how do you gather that data in a much more clean, organized way. There's still a lot of work we have to do.
Lauren, for those in the audience that aren't familiar with WebBank and Avant, they have a strategic partnership, and so they work very closely, especially on compliance and third-party risk management. As Lori alluded to earlier, if there's an issue, the regulators aren't just going to look at the fintech; they're going to look at the banks as well. How is the Avant and WebBank program leveraging these tools today, and what specific improvements, if any, are you guys seeing on the front lines?
Yeah. So the tool, as we're continuing to adopt, like, we're working through it, but we're starting to see some of the benefits right now. Like we've been saying, is it allowing us to be like, there's operational efficiencies for one. There's multiple kind of advantages, right? Like intake and identification and validation. Is this a complaint or not? Like, according to your policy. Is this just negative feedback that you really don't need to respond to, but you categorize it as just somebody's generally unhappy, right? Which, of course, like in a critical mass, negative feedback could be actionable eventually. Risk rating, right? So identifying, hey, this person's complaining about, something that looks real relative to the FCRA, right? Or legal threats, right? And applying like some level of scoring to kind of say, hey, we should probably like take a closer look at this one sooner than later, right? Like, to be able to identify that potential one complaint that could trigger unwanted attention, right? In a more like sort of like real time, close to real time, actionable time frame, and elevate that to either your business risk management team. It may result in corrective action, and further scoping. So, but yeah, those are some of the ways we're already kind of seeing benefits from the tool.
Are you seeing yourselves getting out of front of issues faster and better than you have in the past, operationally speaking?
Yes, I think that we're just getting kind of to that point where we're able to say, like, here's an issue. We were talking about monthly reporting, right? Like, I do monthly reporting that I send, internally to our partners, product teams, and everybody else at Avant, as well as our partner WebBank. But it's, could be the 25th of the month after the month end, right? That's kind of like really looking backwards, like, to our point. So yeah, this is going to allow us to really look at stuff much closer to real time, right? And I think Brian, is spot on in saying, like, what does the evolution of like the complaints function look like? You probably have more highly skilled analysts that are assigned to evaluating those like higher risk complaints that are tagged as such for those other reasons I mentioned. Maybe it's the same customers complaining about the same thing multiple times over in a certain time frame, right? so that we can, just be more proactive about identifying issues and nipping them in the bud.
Lori, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think one of the important things that we have is alignment. So working with Spring Labs, we've got this. We've already got this partnership going on. It's something that we know they're doing the same thing that we are. So the oversight that we have for our partner is it's kind of already done. Like it's happening real time. And as we get those monthly reports, as we get that data, and we're looking into some different trends and different risks and things like that. They've already done it. And so if we're finding something, it's really, really nice to know that they've likely already found it as well, because we're all kind of looking at things, under the same trending. We're looking at the same categories. We're looking at the same subcategories. And I think that that's, something that we really, really appreciate with the partnership and also with Spring Labs.
Thanks for that, Lori. You actually touched on something that triggered a thought about categorization. I think that's something that we're constantly working on. It's evolving. It can be very fluid. What types of insights are you most excited about getting from these AI-powered tools? And specifically, how do they help with categorization of complaints and tiering of severity levels on the front lines?
Do you want me to take that one, Dan?
Please.
Yeah, super excited about that because I don't know how all your systems work, but we have a predefined list of basically 15 master top level categories and then like 200 things, 300 things that roll up under there, right? That have been created dynamically, sort of as needed over time. And to be perfectly honest, probably doesn't get like vetted and cleaned up often enough, right? They're fixed, right? And imagine if you're an agent on the front lines and you're going through the workflow to log the complaint and you're trying to navigate through that menu, right? And determine like, wait, is this about like card reissuance or is this about the fact that they haven't received their card in the mail, like, for our credit card product? Or are there multiple issues here? And then like going back through and again, trying to navigate this like massive menu. And we do training and retraining on complaint processing, complaint identification. But that's a difficult task, right? You hand that off to the analysts on the back end, and then they're doing the same thing, right? They're like, oh, is this correct? Are we really identifying all the issues here? Have I responded to all the issues in the complaint? Like, do I have part of our process is literally to be like, okay, allegation, 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 response, 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 right? To make sure that we're covered off on all that stuff. So to answer the question, what I'm really excited about is the tool's ability, AI's ability to be able to, not just throw out that whole structure, but like, I kind of don't need that, especially the secondary like list of 300 anymore, right? Just tell me what it is, right? Create the categories and the sub issues for me. And they're going to be way more accurate than a human, right? Just to be honest. And they're going to be novel, right? Like they're going to be things that we just don't know about or haven't heard about before. So you have novel issues with the risk ratings,
right,
coupled together. Now you really have something that you can focus on quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, so you're no longer having to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, don't have to use the menu. Throw it away.
I will say I think both are important though, just because like I love understanding like what the emerging sort of categories are, but like looking at standard categories is just important for trend analysis over time. So if you just let the AI engine do what it's going to do and it keeps changing what the categories are slightly, you lose a little bit of that ability to look over the past 3 years, what's happened and how can you triangulate it on like credit policy changes or other product changes to see what happens to the amount of discrete categories that happen over time. So I see a world where both can be pretty important when you look at those trends. But the whole like what are people saying today is super new and super interesting.
Yeah. Lori, what are you seeing from your seat?
So I'm more on the data side of things, and as we have Avant that's got, they're working with Spring Labs. We've got the same information. We're working on the same things. We have a lot more partners, right? So we're getting this data in this way from Avant, and another way from another partner, and another way from another partner. This really helps us to drill it in and say what's going on at our bank. What's going on with these partners? Where are the problems? Do they exist in a particular product? Do they exist in a particular, in credit cards in general? Is there a bunch of, cards are being delivered late across the board? Is there a vendor that we need to be looking at? And so loving the idea of, bringing those together and making it one voice for all of our partners.
That's great. So just moving on then to considerations for adoption of these technologies and the future. If you're looking into your crystal ball, maybe Lauren, maybe you can take this one. Do you see other areas where AI can help increase customer satisfaction beyond complaint management?
How much time do I have? Yes. So I think, obviously generative AI, like voice, right? On the phones, right? You see companies like Klarna already like doing this, right? I think, putting that at the front end, obviously telling people that they're talking to a machine. I think everybody's agreed that's probably the best practice. I think will help tremendously in terms of reducing complaints, especially as the integrations develop and you're able to actually like solve real deep level customer inquiries and problems through the Gen AI voice, right? Which is a difficult problem to solve. I think we're all kind of working on. So, humans are obviously fallible. So if obviously the value play here is that the Gen AI is going to just be more accurate, more efficient. And some people, might say, well, I could just use an IVR. Like, I'll just I don't know about you, but I don't really love navigating like push button IVR. So I think most people would agree with that. Like a lot of people would prefer just to talk to generative AI voice. I think the same goes for obviously for chat and for email, like all the above, right? As any of the engines get to learn about and get integrated deeper within your systems of record, be able to see what's going on at the individual like account level through a secured transaction, through a secured interface, they're going to be able to just solve problems more accurately and efficiently through all of those channels, really. I think even on complaints, like, I think about the future of, the call center and complaints. Like, it's quite possible that in 5 years from now, like our 500 FTE is 40 or 50 highly, highly skilled FTE in Chicago, where our home base is, right? And that the Gen AI is handling most of the actual interactions with the customer. And for complaints, like intake, proposing responses that are reviewed by a human, maybe automating some that are easier, such as like, for example, a customer complaining about receiving too many collections calls. If the engine can go check how many times we called somebody within a certain time frame and be certain that we don't have any FDCPA violations or state reg violations, maybe we let that response eventually go out on its own. I think that's a little ways away. So I think all of those things, there's so many potential implications here to really improve the customer experience, a lot of efficiency gains to reduce complaints.
Have you done any studies in terms of the accuracy of the AI tools versus the compliance analysts that are doing this work manually today?
Well, the tool in its current form is it's taking the intake of the complaint, which was written by the agent, rewriting it, tiering it to like we have tiers 1, 2, 3. I'm sure a lot of you have different risk ratings like that. Like Our tier 1 complaints are based on UDAP and fair lending allegations, as well as certain channels like the FDIC, CFPB, regulatory bodies. And we are going through the tool right now, and I don't have a number to provide quite yet, but that is like a very near-term task to be able to like pull them up side by side and say, hey, the humans thought we had 800 complaints for our credit card product, but actually it was more like 600. And, the rest of these were just basically negative feedback. So that's like on the docket for sure.
Yeah, that's incredible though. Just scratching the surface, it sounds like. Brian, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, for us, it's not that different, I'd say. Like, we got Arlene in the audience here, her team's using it, but like we do a lot of manual work, I'd say, to go through all the complaint files we get. And so it's a very cumbersome process to read through everything to make sure it's categorized correctly. That's what we load into the tool. So when we then compare what AI is doing versus what we're doing, it's not that different yet. But being able to go through and actually do that manual work could be helpful, could be less cumbersome for the team.
And Lori, how about you? Looking ahead, where do you see AI going in 2025 in complaint management and beyond?
Yeah, so for us, it's an oversight future, right? So we oversee our partners. They're already doing the work. I see it in a space where we don't have to guess whether or not they're doing the right job, whether or not they're identifying the right risks, whether or not they're categorizing correctly. Because at that point, we already know what's happening. We already know that they've got the tools that they need. We know that when they don't have the tools they need, we have those tools that we can see deep inside of those complaints without having that manual intervention. It's really telling that story for us, that we're not doing everything so individualized by complaint. Just having that story ready for us is where I see it going.
Lauren, any thoughts on the future beyond
Yeah.
what you've already said?
Yeah. Well, beyond 2025, I think like in the near term, just like realistic goals, right? For like the next year, I do expect to be utilizing AI and the tool for prioritization, for making sure that we are effectively, as a good partner with the bank, communicating where the risks are in much closer to real time. I know we've said this several times, but like doing, having the tool be able to identify things and, kind of bring the real concerns to the top faster, so that, we're working in partnership to make sure that those things are addressed and are visible really sooner.
Brian, how about yourself? What do you see on the horizon?
I think more investments in data management, in BI, in analytics. Just we have experts that have to analyze this data, and they know what to look for, but like presenting the data in a way that is much more effectively just presented to them, so they know like what to go look at, what are the lessons. We're gonna get more out of that, right? I think.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, allows your analysts to focus on the big rocks and to use their time in the highest and best way possible.
Yeah, and to work with partners to figure out how to solve problems.
Yeah, Dan, I'll just like add to that, like looking further and further out to the future. At some point, I would hope that complaints are being identified and logged by tools that are just listening to the calls, right? Like take the burden on the agent, the human, out of the equation altogether, really. Careful what you wish for, right? Like volumes may spike or not, like, you may get a lot more data and information than you anticipated. But I think that's probably like where we're going ultimately.
Great. It looks like we're right on time. And we've got a pretty packed house and wanted to make sure that we have enough time for questions. Anyone have a question in the audience? I think I see someone in the front row.
Going back to investing
Yeah, Brian, do you want to take
Yeah,
that?
I mean, the people that own the acquisition strategies, typically they measure silent attrition and loud attrition. Is it a charge off? Someone stop using their card and just, stop the spending. And they've got the curves that show what the economics look like over time. It's like, I think, trying to triangulate it on like what was the cause of the dissatisfaction? What was the cause of the silent attrition that led to lower revenues? Like that can come out. I think it can create signals. It can't create a signal that you can use to make the decision up front because you don't have that data a priori, but it does help you, I think, understand what aspects of the product led to those concerns. So there is some application, but it just can't give you variables to use in your models.
It's a great question. Lauren, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Things like utilization. Why aren't people using the cards? Why are they closing them? Would be insights there.
Question back?
I think both. I think on one hand, we expect our partners to have already done that job. And then on the offset, we go and do it again and just compare notes and make sure that we're on the same page. And then we report to our board as well, right? So we've got to tell a story. Hopefully it typically is the same story that our partners are telling us. And so I think it's a matter of, did we find something different than what our partners found? And then our output being, our different reporting, our different trending, our different risk identification as well. So I think kind of both.
Great. Any other questions? Right there.
We spent a lot of time talking to different companies there's a lot of new companies coming into the AI world. And I'd say we found it's pretty unbalanced. Like, I'm not sure there's a standard definition of what AI is, but we really wanted to make sure that we found a company that was able to decipher language and really show us insights out of that language. And we felt like working with Spring Labs was the best at doing that, and also the best at, for us, talking to us and like listening to us and collaborating with us. Like we had really high level of collaboration with them. So that's I think, what's the product name? Is it Raya?
I think so.
Yeah.
Is that the current name?
Zanko.
They changed it
Zanko.
again. See, they're changing their names and confusing me,
Man.
but yeah.
I should have wrote that down.
Yeah.
Lauren, anything you want to add to that?
I think there's a bunch more questions if we want to try to capture one or two more.
Right there.
Yeah, I can answer that. So it's typically through just partnership with the business units and or corrective action, right? So like if you're identifying issues, you're logging corrective action, that's going to get investigated for scope, root cause, end to end. For things that are just process improvements, we have like different, as I'm sure most of you, ticketing systems to escalate like potential, changes to the different business units or product owners. To be perfectly honest, those are harder to get pushed through, right? Like corrective action is corrective action, like it's going to get done, right? So those are like where you have to make more of a business case, right? But it's really just like, I think we're relatively, everybody's pretty flat. They're transparent, and it's a flat organization where we can talk to each other very easily. I think that's key, like when you're seeing things and complaints, to be able to just communicate across the org effectively.
Thanks, Lauren. Any other questions over there in the corner? Lauren, I've got a pretty good example of this one too from the past, but
Sure.
do you want to lead off?
I think, I think that with the CFPB, all of the regulatory channels, like there isn't, as you know, there's no filtering, right? Anybody can submit whatever they want through there. There's no gatekeeper. So I think this tool will be especially helpful in identifying real issues within, a population of complaints where there is no determination of whether this is an actual issue or not, or somebody's just upset.
Which just reminds me, years ago when Lauren and I used to work together at Avant, we did have some very rudimentary credit reporting, monitoring, and trading analysis in place. And I'll never forget what we saw early on when we started reporting data to the bureaus, and that's that we saw a lot of credit reporting disputes around paid off status. And what we learned through that data was that we were getting a lot of complaints from folks that had paid off and they were looking to take out a mortgage, take out a car loan, and they expected, reasonably or not, that their credit reporting would be updated immediately. And through the efforts of our complaint management team, credit reporting team, we discovered that this was an issue. We surfaced this to the business and we started providing supplemental files to the bureaus, which obviously isn't
Still going
required by
today.
the FCRA. It's happening today. And I just like to think about how a tool like this, if we had it, man, how long ago was that? 6, 7 years ago, would have allowed us to identify the issue in real time and take meaningful action to make the experience better for our customers without having to get involved in a protracted discussion about getting resources and framing the problem and taking
Totally.
action.
And I know we're like out of time, but I have plenty of examples if anybody wants to find me on the side of things we have found that we could have found maybe back here.
Great. Well, I think we're at time. As promised, we have a great panel for you today. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.